Good Wednesday morning. Today is December 28th, and today is the Feast of the Holy Innocents. I'll read the Gospel to you. He said, When the Magi had departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you. Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him. Joseph rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod, that what the Lord had said through the prophet might be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I have called my son. When Herod realized that he had been deceived by the Magi, he became furious. He ordered the massacre of all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity, 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had ascertained from the Magi. Then was fulfilled what had been said through Jeremiah the prophet. A voice was heard in Ramah, sobbing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children, and she would not be consoled, since they were no more. From the very beginning, even the babies were the martyrs. You can't get away from the cross, the martyrdom, even the innocent, the suffering of the innocent. In this profound sense, witness who and what is Christ. And they have ever since. It's hard for me not to think of the Holocaust. It's very hard for me not to think of it. All the suffering of those children. I'm thinking now of the children that were gassed. They were innocent. They were innocent. And yet they witness, I guess, I think, I hope. They have to be witnessing that there's something greater, because the evil done to them is so unthinkable and unjustifiable. It can never be cured. There's nothing in this world that can justify it. There has to be more. And the innocents, the holy innocents that are celebrated here today, witness to that. They celebrated Christ. And with Christ, they're forevermore alive in Christ. I certainly believe that. Of the holy innocents, those Jewish kids that were slaughtered. I believe that. I believe that they all shared and they all are participant in the fullness of the suffering of Christ. They fill up those things, wanting in the suffering of Christ. Thank you, St. Paul. I mean that. I mean it. Or else this world makes no sense. I mean, we can have the joys and the pleasures of Christmas, but the church is reminding us that there's no shortcut to life, and that in the end we all live in the shadow of the cross. We all share in that cross, but not out of despair, but out of hope that life and that suffering is not final, that death is not final, and that life is final. I didn't say that well. See, the church is reminding us it's stark. These are stark mysteries. You have the glory of Christmas Day followed by Stephen Martyr, and a few minutes later, a couple of days later, 2 days later, you got the Holy Innocents. It's a stark reminder of the redemptive suffering of humanity itself. Now in anticipation of the suffering of Christ, but looking back in fulfillment through the suffering of Christ. And I have to say, it's the hope I have, because I certainly don't believe that that life is fair. How can it look, when you look at the 20th century, how can you say life is fair? How many millions of innocent people were killed in the throes and the backwaters of war, or deliberately by the Nazis? Yeah. Or just by bombing of cities. They weren't just the combatants who were killed. There were millions and millions of people who were innocent. Yeah, see? There has to be more. There has to be more than this life, especially because there is no justice in this life. There's fragments of it. But how can one ever say that there is some form of justice when you see the suffering of the innocent in the 20th century alone and throughout history? The holy innocents that was slaughtered by Herod. How can that be justified by any human standard of justice? There has to be more. I don't know how my agnostic and atheistic friends can face life when they stare at the horrors of life and without hope that there is a final and an ultimate justice, a final goodness triumphant over it, especially for the suffering of the innocent. I don't know. I'm not critical. I'm in wonderment, to be honest about it. It's not that Christianity gives us some kind of fail-safe solution. It gives us hope that in the death of Christ, all die, and in the resurrection of Christ, all rise. Grant you, if Christ didn't rise from the death, we're the biggest fools of all, our Christians, of course. But if he rose, then we are the most blessed because we have hope that death isn't final. See, and that goodness and justice triumph over injustice and evil. And that the suffering of the innocent is not vain, but in fact is redemptive for themselves. That they share in the suffering of Christ, and therefore and therefore Easter Sunday, that goodness will triumph. I know I'm beating this to death, but it isn't me. It's the text. I'm just looking at the text given. The church could have sent us a whole week full of smiles, but happy feelings, but she doesn't. She reminds us over and over, we share in the suffering of Christ. And that is the hope of redemption, not just in his birth, but in his passion and death and his resurrection. So that our suffering, the suffering and the death, especially of the innocent, is not in vain, but is transformed by the blood and death of Christ. That in his death, we all die. And in his resurrection, we all rise. And that goodness is triumphant. Life triumphs over death. Goodness over evil. Justice over injustice. Personally. Not in some abstract philosophical scheme, but in the personal lives of every individual. That's the truth, too. I know that's what the church is doing here. She is reminding us over and over and over and over again that Christmas leads to Good Friday and Easter Sunday, and with that, the completion of the Christmas mystery. That in Christ's death, life and death, we find life. And life that will not go away. And our lives will triumph in Christ forever.